Breaking news. Police just arrested singer Chris Brown after a day-long standoff at his Tarzana mansion.
The incident began overnight when a woman at Brown's house called police for help.
Thousands of fans are screaming his name, arena lights are blazing, and the energy in the stadium is electric. But offstage, the atmosphere is dead silent. In just a few weeks, all of this could come crashing down, swapping sold-out shows for a cold cell in a foreign country. One of the biggest names in modern R&B is standing right on the edge, walking a tightrope between absolute stardom and serious prison time. How did one of music's biggest megastars end up standing in a foreign dock facing a potential prison sentence? Is it goodbye, forever, for Breezy? The London plea, guilty or not guilty? Spoiler alert, Brown pled guilty. Inside London's Southwark Crown Court, the room went dead silent as the 37-year-old R&B superstar stepped up to the dock. Dressed in a tan suit, gold-rimmed sunglasses, and a St. Louis Cardinals baseball cap, he looked more like he was walking into a high-end fashion event than a British courtroom. But when the clerk called his name and read out the public order charge, the global music icon uttered a single word: guilty. Just like that, he officially admitted to a fray, a serious criminal offense under UK law defined as using or threatening unlawful violence in a way that makes anyone on the scene fear for their personal safety. Is this sentence final and goodbye for him? Well, this court appearance sent shockwaves across the internet. But it was actually the climax of a high-stakes legal game of chess that took months to unfold. When prosecutors first brought this case forward, they weren't messing around. They hit him with far heavier felony-level charges, including intent to cause grievous bodily harm, assault causing actual bodily harm, and possession of an offensive weapon in a public space, the weapon in question being a heavy glass bottle. If convicted on those top counts at a full trial, he wasn't just looking at probation. He was facing serious time behind bars in a foreign prison. Seeing the writing on the wall, his legal team went to work behind closed doors to strike a deal with the Crown Prosecution Service. They agreed to swap a long, messy, and extremely risky trial for a swift guilty plea to a fray. In exchange, British prosecutors threw out the heaviest charges, completely dropping the counts for grievous bodily harm and weapon possession. On paper, dodging those major assault felonies was a massive strategic victory for his defense team. But don't let the legal maneuvering fool you. He is far from completely off the hook. Under English law, an affray conviction is no slap on the wrist. It carries a maximum statutory sentence of up to 3 years in prison. And the presiding judge made it crystal clear that all sentencing options remain wide open. For now, he remains out on a massive £5 million bail, roughly $6.75 million, which requires him to follow strict international travel protocols, including surrendering his passport upon landing in various countries. Immediately after entering his guilty plea, he walked past a crowd of loyal fans waiting outside the courthouse, stopped to sign autographs while his tracks played in the background, and jumped into a waiting vehicle. His freedom is temporary. He is legally bound to return to London court on October 25th to face his formal sentencing hearing scheduled for October 26th. Until that judge hands down the final decision, the threat of real prison time hangs over his head like a dark cloud. The guilty plea brought an end to his initial defense strategy of total denial, forcing him to take accountability on the public record for a chaotic night that almost ended his international touring career before it even started. To understand why a routine night out in London exploded into an international legal nightmare, you have to rewind to early 2023 of the night at Tape. What triggered the charges? Let's rewind to the early morning hours of February 19th, 2023. The setting was Tape, an ultra-exclusive nightclub tucked away in London's lavish Mayfair district. Known as a playground for A-list celebrities, athletes, and music executives, the club was packed to capacity when Brown arrived with his crew. Among the VIP guests that night was music producer Abraham Dial. Dial wasn't just a stranger in the venue, He had previously worked in the same industry circles and considered himself a former associate. But as the drinks flowed and the night wore on, an unspoken tension on the dance floor quickly escalated into full-blown chaos. According to official prosecution statements from the Crown Prosecution Service, Brown aggressively moved through the crowded dance floor straight toward Diao. Without warning, what was supposed to be a high-end night out spiraled into a vicious, unprovoked assault. Prosecutors revealed that Brown cornered the producer and struck him over the head twice using a heavy glass bottle, specifically a bottle of Don Julio 1942 tequila. Before the victim could even process what was happening, Brown's longtime friend and vocal coach, Omalolu Akinlolu, known in music circles as Hoodie Baby, joined in on the attack. Akinlolu jumped in, throwing punches directly at Diao's head, while the disoriented producer desperately tried to scramble through the club crowd to escape. The attack didn't stop once the victim hit the ground. As Diao lay practically defenseless on the nightclub floor, security cameras captured the shocking moment he was repeatedly kicked and struck. The brutal brawl left the producer bloodied, requiring urgent medical treatment at St. Mary's Hospital for significant head and knee injuries. By the time local law enforcement arrived at the scene to restore order and review the club's high-definition security footage, Brown and his entire entourage had already vanished into the London night. Realizing the severity of the situation and the threat of incoming legal action, Brown boarded a private jet and flew out of the United Kingdom shortly after the incident took place. Because he immediately exited British jurisdiction, the Metropolitan Police issued an active warrant for his arrest. For over 2 full years, the case remained in a strange legal limbo, while Brown continued living his life and touring across other parts of the globe. But UK authorities were playing the long game. They quietly waited for the superstar to return to British soil, knowing his massive international tour schedule would eventually bring him back. The trap finally sprung on May 15, 2025. The moment Brown touched down in Manchester for a scheduled concert on his world tour, officers swooped into his luxury hotel and placed him under arrest. The arrest set off a chaotic media frenzy, forcing the singer to secure his release on an eye-watering £5 million bail so he could complete his tour obligations. Prosecutors built an airtight case centered on crystal-clear surveillance footage that documented the entire bottle attack frame by frame. Face-to-face with damning video evidence that left zero room for plausible deniability, his legal team knew that taking the case to a full jury trial on charges of grievous bodily harm was an immense gamble. That stark reality is ultimately what forced him to cut a deal and enter his guilty plea. Yet, the violent confrontation in London was far from an isolated spark in his tempestuous career. The US civil storm, dogs, backstage brawls, and courtrooms. While British authorities were building their criminal case across the Atlantic, a relentless wave of massive civil lawsuits was crashing down on the superstar back home in the United States. For years, his legal team has been fighting a multi-front war in American courtrooms, defending against explosive allegations ranging from horrific personal injuries on his private property to bloody backstage ambushes during his nationwide arena tours. The total financial damages sought against him across these various civil filings routinely climb deep into the tens of millions of dollars, creating a relentless trail of litigation that threatens his multi-million-dollar fortune. The most staggering legal blow landed in a Los Angeles courtroom following a grueling civil trial. The case originated from a horrifying December 2020 incident at his sprawling, multi-million-dollar estate in Tarzana, California. According to court documents, his longtime housekeeper, Maria Avila, was performing routine cleaning duties outside the residence when she was suddenly ambushed by his guard dog, a massive 200-pound Caucasian shepherd named Hades. The breed, historically utilized for military defense and securing high-security Russian penitentiaries, inflicted catastrophic injuries on the defenseless worker. The animal clamped down on her face and shredded her left arm, tearing away large sections of muscle and skin before she could escape. Emergency medical crews rushed Avila to the hospital, where surgeons performed multiple emergency procedures, including harvesting skin grafts from her abdomen to rebuild her torn arm. The attack left her with permanent physical scarring, severe nerve damage, and crippling post-traumatic stress disorder that rendered her completely unable to work. During his own sworn testimony, the R&B icon admitted that he personally discovered the victim lying face down in a pool of blood. However, he openly acknowledged under oath that he fled his own property before paramedics arrived, leaving his private security guards to manage the scene. When pressed by plaintiff attorneys about why he abandoned the bleeding woman, he admitted he wanted to avoid creating a headline-grabbing media circus because of his high-profile celebrity status. Jurors flatly rejected his defense arguments, claiming the housekeeper was partially responsible for entering the yard unescorted. The trial concluded with a crushing verdict ordering him and his business entity, Black Pyramid LLC, to pay a staggering $12.9 million in personal injury damages to Avila, along with hundreds of thousands in additional compensation to her family members who witnessed the bloody aftermath. Yet, even as the ink was drying on that massive multi-million-dollar judgment, his troubles were actively mounting on the road during his high-earning 11/11 tour. In July 2024, 4 concertgoers filed a massive $50 million lawsuit in Harris County, Texas, following an event at Dickies Arena in Fort Worth. The plaintiffs alleged they were invited into a private VIP section after the performance to meet the star. When one attendee tried to shake his hand, a member of his entourage pointed out a past verbal feud between the two. The lawsuit claims the artist instantly snapped, declaring he never forgets past issues, and explicitly commanded his crew to attack the men. What followed was described in legal filings as a brutal, prison yard-style beatdown. Up to 10 members of his entourage allegedly trapped the men in a hallway, punching, stomping, and throwing heavy metal chairs at them. One victim was chased down a stairwell into a locked emergency exit door where he was stomped on the head for over 10 minutes, while the singer reportedly urged his crew to keep hitting him. Days later, an arena security guard who attempted to break up the melee filed a separate $15 million lawsuit, claiming he suffered a cracked vertebra in his neck when a 300-pound member of the artist's crew repeatedly stomped on him. Beyond physical altercations and civil claims, his legal battles expanded into a high-stakes war against the media itself. The half-billion-dollar war, documentaries, and defamation. As civil claims and criminal investigations piled up around him, the battleground over his public image spilled out of physical courtrooms and directly onto television screens across the globe. Network producers and investigative journalists began assembling extensive television projects, detailing his turbulent decade and a half in the spotlight, framing his career through the lens of a long-standing pattern of public altercations and personal misconduct allegations. But unlike past public relations crises, where his team issued polite, scripted public statements and waited for news cycles to blow over, the R&B star decided to strike back with unprecedented legal hostility, mounting an all-out half-billion-dollar war against major media conglomerates. The breaking point came with the release of the high-profile television project Chris Brown, A History of Violence, produced by Ample Entertainment and broadcast across Warner Brothers Discovery platforms. The explosive film revisited the most dark and controversial moments of his adult life, cataloging everything from his infamous 2009 pre-Grammy assault on Rihanna to subsequent protective orders filed by ex-girlfriends, physical altercations with television staff, and backstage brawls. However, the central, most explosive focus of the docuseries was an in-depth interview with a woman identified in court documents as Jane Doe. She went on camera to detail allegations that the singer had given her an intoxicating substance and sexually assaulted her aboard a luxury yacht docked in Miami back in late 2020. Refusing to sit back while network executives broadcast the claims to millions of subscribers, the artist went nuclear. In January 2025, his legal team filed a massive, earth-shattering $500 million defamation lawsuit in Los Angeles Superior Court, targeting Warner Brothers Discovery and Ample Entertainment. His complaint slammed the producers for prioritizing digital engagement, network ratings, and streaming subscription dollars over fundamental journalistic standards and truth. His attorneys forcefully pointed out that he has never been convicted of any sexual crime, declaring that the documentary recklessly labeled him a serial predator based on unproven, discredited, and ultimately dismissed civil claims. His defense team highlighted the crucial fact that the woman's original 2022 civil lawsuit over the alleged yacht incident had already been thrown out of court after law enforcement and defense investigators uncovered text and voice messages that directly contradicted her timeline. According to court filings, the accuser had actively pursued a consensual relationship with the singer following the alleged event, sending flattering messages that completely undermined her legal claims. His lawyers argued that the documentary producers were fully aware of these discredited text messages prior to airtime, yet knowingly suppressed those key facts to sensationalize their television narrative and smear his personal brand. However, the high-stakes legal gamble ultimately hit a brick wall in early 2026 when Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Colin Lees officially dismissed the defamation suit against the media companies. The judge ruled that the documentary presented a fair and true report of ongoing public records and judicial proceedings, explicitly noting that the film actually mentioned the inconsistent text messages in question. While the court granted the producers immunity under media freedom laws, the intense legal clash made one thing crystal clear. The superstar is no longer willing to quietly take public hits to his character without launching massive financial counterattacks. With a legal trail this extensive, any other artist's career would have collapsed, so why hasn't his? The untouchable megastar, charts, arenas, and unshakable sales. In any traditional industry model, a relentless string of criminal charges, multi-million-dollar dog attack judgments, and high-stakes media wars would instantly destroy an artist's commercial viability. Brand endorsements would evaporate. Venue managers would pull the plug on booking dates, and radio programmers would permanently scrub the catalog from broadcast rotations. Yet, in the case of this R&B titan, the usual rules of corporate cancellation simply do not apply. Instead of fading into obscurity, his commercial engine continues to run at absolute full throttle, shattering box office records and pulling in billions of digital streams as if the heavy courtroom drama simply doesn't exist. His untouchable standing in the modern music landscape is driven by numbers that most artists can only dream of hitting. With over 140 million records sold globally, he firmly holds a spot among the best-selling digital musicians of all time. On the Billboard charts, his presence is nothing short of historic, boasting over 125 career entries on the Hot 100, placing him in elite, top 10 territory alongside music legends. Every time he drops a project, from massive double-disc records like Heartbreak on a Full Moon to his 12th studio album, Brown, his core listeners stream the music in massive waves, consistently landing him at the very top of the R&B hip-hop chart rankings. Where his dominance turns into absolute financial dominance, however, is on the live touring circuit. While mainstream headlines focus heavily on his court dockets, millions of dedicated fans line up around city blocks to buy high-priced arena and stadium tickets. His concert runs, including his massive 11/11 tour and his record-breaking Breezy Bowl 20 World Tour, have smashed revenue records, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in ticket sales and filling major stadiums across North America, Europe, and beyond. His ability to pull nearly 5 million concertgoers into arenas over his career proves that his live performance draw is completely bulletproof, insulated from whichever scandal happens to be breaking in the news that week. At the center of this financial fortress is his fan base, widely known as Team Breezy. Rather than distancing themselves during his most intense legal battles, his supporters routinely double down, rallying behind him across every social media platform. To his die-hard followers, his raw vocal talent, unmatched stage presence, and legendary dance routines far outweigh any allegations or civil judgments handed down by the court system. They view media scrutiny not as legitimate accountability, but as a biased, targeted campaign to bring down a generational talent. This fierce loyalty creates a powerful financial shield that renders traditional cancel culture virtually useless. When an artist can effortlessly sell out 33 consecutive stadium dates, generate over $500 million in career touring revenue, and log continuous chart hits, corporate partners and record labels inevitably stay in business with him. The sheer profitability of his brand creates an unstoppable feedback loop, where his artistic output consistently overshadows his legal baggage. As long as millions of people keep pressing play and filling stadium seats, the music industry will continue to open its doors to him. His success, however, leaves the entertainment world deeply divided down the middle. Public polarization. This extreme paradox creates a massive, ongoing war of words across the music industry, splitting artists, executives, critics, and listeners straight down the middle. On one side stand his fierce defenders, a powerful coalition of fellow superstars, producers, and industry heavyweights who openly champion his generational talent. High-profile collaborators continuously line up to jump on his tracks, with artists like Wizkid, Lil Wayne, Tyga, and Bryson Tiller consistently praising his studio work ethic, vocal range, and unmatched dancing abilities. When critics push back, these peers argue that his immense artistic contributions to R&B deserve to stand on their own merit, separate from his personal legal problems. To many inside the recording booth, his raw abilities as an entertainer are simply too legendary to ignore or cast aside. On the flip side, a vocal faction of music journalists, social commentators, and advocacy groups view his continued mainstream success as a damning indictment of the entire music business. Cultural critics regularly point out that while other public figures have seen their careers instantly dismantled over far lesser allegations, he continues to win major awards, secure high-profile distribution deals with RCA Records, and headline massive global stadium runs. Critics contend that corporate executives willingly turn a blind eye to his court dockets simply because his brand generates hundreds of millions of dollars. They argue that this financial protection shield sets a dangerous precedent in pop culture, proving that absolute commercial profitability can effectively buy an artist total immunity from traditional social accountability. This deep division spills directly into the public sphere, transforming every major award show appearance, radio play placement, and concert announcement into a heated internet debate. Whenever he drops a new chart-topping record or sells out an arena in record time, social media platforms immediately break down into two opposing camps. His supporters point to his decades of hit-making and his long-standing status as a premier performer who has carried modern R&B on his back. Meanwhile, his detractors demand that radio stations scrub his music entirely, arguing that continuing to celebrate his catalog actively minimizes the serious physical injuries and legal complaints documented in courtrooms across the world. What makes this industry divide so unique is that neither side is backing down. Award show producers routinely face intense internal debates over whether to invite him to perform, knowing his appearances bring both sky-high television ratings and immediate public backlash. Major brands often tread carefully, avoiding traditional corporate endorsement deals, while record labels eagerly fight to release his multi-track projects. Even radio programmers find themselves caught in the middle, balancing strict corporate guidelines against massive request lines from listeners who demand his music on the airwaves. Ultimately, he remains one of the most polarizing figures in modern entertainment history, a star whose phenomenal raw talent commands universal awe, even as his chaotic off-stage life fuels non-stop outrage. To truly grasp how this duality was created, you have to go back to the very beginning. The prodigy's roots, Tappahannock to stardom. You have to strip away the courtroom dockets and look at where the talent originated. Born Christopher Maurice Brown on May 5, 1989, in the small, quiet town of Tappahannock, Virginia, his early years were steeped in a deep, organic connection to rhythm and sound. Raised by his mother, Joyce Hawkins, who ran a local daycare center, and his father, Clinton Brown, a corrections officer, he grew up surrounded by classic soul, gospel, and the golden age of hip-hop. Long before he ever saw a professional stage, he was soaking up records by Sam Cooke, Stevie Wonder, and Michael Jackson, obsessively teaching himself to dance in his living room and singing in his local church choir. His natural abilities were impossible to ignore, but his childhood was far from an idyllic fairy tale. Following his parents' early divorce, he witnessed domestic hardship firsthand, including witnessing intense marital friction and domestic abuse in his household, experiences that deeply affected him during his formative years. Music and dance quickly became his ultimate escape valve, an outlet where he could channel his boundless energy and process his chaotic surroundings. By the time he was a preteen, his mother recognized that her son's explosive performing skills went far beyond standard childhood enthusiasm. She began aggressively helping him enter local talent showcases, where he routinely blew past older competitors with his raw vocal control and effortless physical acrobatics. The defining turning point came when he was just 13 years old. Local talent scouts discovered him performing at a gas station where his father worked. Immediately recognizing the young teenager as a once-in-a-generation triple-threat performer. Within a couple of years, he made the life-altering decision to leave high school in Virginia and move directly to New York City to chase a major recording deal. Executives at Tina Davis's Hit Mission management team and eventually Jive Records were stunned by his audition. He didn't just sing with smooth, soulful precision, but he moved with the razor-sharp athleticism of a young Michael Jackson or Usher. In 2004, at just 15 years old, he officially signed his first major label deal with Jive. When his self-titled debut album, Chris Brown, hit store shelves in late 2005, the music industry was instantly conquered. Fueled by the explosive lead single Run It, which rocketed straight to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, he became the first male artist in nearly a decade to top the charts with a debut track. The album went double platinum, making him an overnight pop sensation, teen heartthrob, and the uncontested prince of mainstream R&B. He was marketed as the ultimate boy next door, clean-cut, wildly energetic, deeply talented, and universally adored by fans of all ages. That squeaky clean early image laid down a massive foundation of goodwill, creating a nostalgic connection for millions of listeners who grew up watching a 16-year-old kid flip across music video sets and light up global charts. But as he transitioned from a teenage prodigy into an adult superstar, the smooth pop trajectory was permanently shattered, leaving that early innocence behind for a far darker, infinitely more complex reality. That early brilliance laid the groundwork for a legendary musical catalog that keeps his name alive. An unstoppable momentum. To understand why fans keep streaming his music regardless of what unfolds in court, you have to look directly at the sheer scale of his creative output. Across his multi-decade career, he has built one of the most exhaustive, genre-defining discographies in modern R&B history. From early defining projects like FAME, which earned him his first Grammy Award for Best R&B Album, to creative high points like X, he proved early on that he could effortlessly blend classic soulful melodies with heavy pop and hip-hop influences. Rather than slowing down as he matured, his studio work ethic only became more relentless. He began releasing massive, sprawling track lists, including the 45-song double album Heartbreak on a Full Moon and the 32-track record Indigo, flooding streaming platforms and dominating digital playlists worldwide. That incredible studio drive laid the groundwork for his 11th studio project, 1111, along with his follow-up releases, which continued to secure top spots on the Billboard R&B charts and yield major Grammy nominations for hits like Summer Too Hot. Track after track, he delivers the signature formula his listeners demand. Smooth vocal runs, high-energy dance anthems, and deeply emotional ballads that keep him permanently rooted at the center of global R&B culture. On stage, his live execution remains unmatched. During his massive 1111 tour and subsequent world runs, he consistently performs complex, high-flying choreography for hours at a time, commanding stadiums with the kind of physical athleticism that continuously draws comparisons to pop icons like Michael Jackson and Usher. Yet, as his musical catalog continues to generate billions of streams and sell out major arenas, the shadow of his upcoming court date looms larger than ever. The dramatic online phrases whispering that a sentence is final or declaring a goodbye forever might feel premature to fans who are used to seeing him dodge career-ending disasters, but the reality inside London's Southwark Crown Court is as real as it gets. For the first time in a long time, the global megastar isn't just fighting off a civil lawsuit or managing a PR storm. He is waiting on an official judicial verdict that could force him away from the stage and put his massive career on an indefinite pause. Whether October 26th brings a lenient probation agreement or hands down a multi-year prison sentence, one thing remains absolutely certain. The music he built over 20 years isn't going anywhere. His fan base will keep pressing play. Arenas will keep filling up whenever he takes the stage, and his legacy will remain one of the most brilliant, chaotic, and fiercely debated sagas in pop culture history. His fate in a London courtroom may be completely out of his hands, but his voice, his dance moves, and his legendary catalog ensure that his footprint on modern music will echo forever. As the countdown to October ticks away, only time will tell if his legacy survives this ultimate legal storm or if the music finally stops. What do you think happens next? Leave your thoughts below and hit subscribe for more.